At dawn on Friday, the 13th of October 1307, across every corner of the Kingdom of France, the king's men broke the wax seals on letters. They had been forbidden, on pain of death, to open until that exact hour. Inside those letters was a single order: arrest every Knight Templar in France, every brother, every commander, every old crusader, all of them on the same morning, at the same hour, in total secrecy. The largest coordinated mass arrest in the history of medieval Europe. By nightfall, the richest, proudest, most feared military order in Christendom was in chains. Within 7 years, its Grand Master would burn alive in the heart of Paris and curse from the flames a pope and a king to die within the year. This is the trial of the Knights Templar. To understand why a Christian king destroyed an army of Christian monks, you have to understand what the Knights Templar had become. They began 200 years earlier as 9 poor knights, sworn to protect pilgrims on the road to Jerusalem. Poor, that was the vow. But the order that began in poverty became, within a century, the wealthiest institution in the Western world. Kings borrowed from them, popes banked with them. They owned 9,000 estates across Europe. They held castles, fleets, farms, entire towns. And here is the part that historians find delicious. The Templars effectively invented modern international banking. A pilgrim could deposit his money in Paris, carry a coded paper note across 1,000 miles, and withdraw his gold in Jerusalem. No coin on the road. No robbers could touch it. The poor knights of the temple had become the bankers of God. They answered to no king. They paid no taxes. They reported only to the Pope himself, an independent army, richer than any monarch, loyal to no crown, sitting inside the borders of France, like a state within a state, to a certain kind of king. That is not an ally. That is a threat. That is a target. On the throne of France sat Philip the Fourth. They called him Philip the Fair, not for his justice, but for his face. Beautiful, silent, cold as altar stone. A contemporary said that he was neither a man nor a beast, but a statue. And Philip the Fair had a problem. He was broke. Catastrophically, kingdom-endingly broke. He had fought ruinous wars against England and Flanders. He had already debased his own coinage until riots broke out in Paris. He had already robbed and expelled the Jews of France and seized everything they owned. He had already turned on the Italian bankers and squeezed them dry. He had run out of people to rob, almost, because there was one institution in France, still impossibly rich, one vault still full, and Philip owed it an enormous sum of money. When his treasury had collapsed in 1306 and the mob had hunted him through the streets of Paris, where did the King of France hide? Behind the walls of the Paris Temple, the fortress of the Knights Templar. He sheltered with his creditors. He saw their treasure up close, and he wanted it. But you cannot simply seize the property of the Pope's own holy warriors. You cannot rob an order of monks who fought for Christ in the Holy Land. Not unless, and here is the whole of the conspiracy, in a single sentence, not unless you can prove they were never holy at all. Not unless you can prove they serve the devil to build the lie. Philip turned to his chief minister, Guillaume de Nogaret, a lawyer, a bureaucrat, a man whose own grandparents had reportedly been burned as heretics and who had spent his whole career proving he was more Catholic than the Pope. Nogaret had already done the unthinkable once. He had personally led an armed raid that seized the previous Pope, Boniface, and reportedly struck the old man across the face. The Pope died of the shock weeks later. This was the man Philip set loose on the Templars.
We will not accuse them of poverty, sire. We will not accuse them of greed. Those are the sins of men. We will accuse them of the sins of devils. We will say that on the night a brother is admitted to the order, in secret, behind locked doors, he is made to deny Christ 3 times, to spit upon the cross, to kiss the men who receive him upon the mouth, the navel, and lower still, and to bow before an idol, a bearded head, a demon they call Baphomet.
None of it was true. There is no Baphomet. There never was. But it did not need to be true. It only needed to be confessed. And Nogret knew exactly how to obtain a confession. The charges were drafted in secret. Over the summer of 1307, the arrest orders were written, sealed, and distributed to every royal official in France, with the command not to open them until dawn on October the 13th, a Friday the 13th, the day that some say earned its curse. Right here, at the head of the order, stood Jacques de Molay, the 23rd Grand Master of the Knights Templar, an old soldier near 70, who had fought in the Holy Land and risen to command every Templar on earth. 2 days before the arrests, he had been an honored guest at the royal court. He had served as a pallbearer at a royal funeral beside the king himself. Philip embraced him, smiled at him, called him friend, and had already signed the order to destroy him. On the morning of the 13th, the soldiers came for him inside the Paris temple itself. The Grand Master surrendered without a fight. So did they all. Across France, some 15,000 Templars, knights, sergeants, chaplains, servants were taken in a single coordinated sweep. The proudest fighting men in Christendom did not draw a single sword. They believed they were innocent. They believed the Pope would save them. They believed in the law. They were dragged into the dungeons of the Inquisition. And there, in the dark, the law of God met the instruments of men. Here's what the modern viewer must understand. Under the procedure of the Inquisition, torture was not a crime. It was a tool, a legal instrument to obtain truth. And the men running these examinations were the most skilled practitioners of pain in Europe.
Brother, I am not your enemy. I am the friend of your soul. The king has already told us what happened on the night you joined the order. We know about the cross. We know about the kiss. We know about the idol. You need not invent anything. You need only agree. Say yes, and the fire stops. Say yes, and you may go to your bed. Refuse, and we will simply continue until tomorrow.
They used the strappado, the wrists bound behind the back, the body hauled into the air by the arms, until the shoulders tore from their sockets. They used the rack. They used fire. In one infamous method, they smeared a brother's feet with fat and held them to the flames until the bones fell out of them. One Templar later carried the loose bones of his own feet into court in a small box to show the judges what had been done to him.
Yes, anything. I spat on the cross. I deny him. I deny Christ. There was a head, a demon's head. We worshipped it. Only stop in the name of God. Only stop.
He confessed to everything. So did they all. Out of 138 Templars examined in Paris, 134 confessed. Knights who had charged Saracen cavalry without flinching wept and confessed to kissing the devil. Within weeks, dozens had died under the questioning. But the parchments filled up with confessions, and a confession in that court was proof. And the Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, near 70, old and proud, he broke too within days of his arrest before the assembled University of Paris. The highest Templar on earth admitted that he had denied Christ and spat beside the cross. The king had his prize. The most famous warrior monk in Europe had confessed to serving the devil. There was, in theory, one man on earth who could stop this: the Pope. The Templars answered to him and to no one else. Pope Clement V could, with a single word, dissolve the whole proceeding. But Clement was not a free man. He was a Frenchman. Philip had engineered his election. He did not even live in Rome. He sat at Avignon, inside Philip's reach, surrounded by Philip's soldiers. When the king seized the Templars, Without papal permission, Clement raged for a few days, and then he folded.
The king has overstepped. He has laid hands on my own order without my leave, and yet the confessions, so many confessions, 134. What am I to do if I defend them and they are guilty? I damn myself. And if I defend them, the king will accuse me. He will say that I, to protect heretics. He destroyed the last pope who defied him. God, forgive me. God, forgive me. I cannot save them.
When the Templars were brought before papal commissioners, something extraordinary happened. Away from the king's torturers, hundreds of them took it all back. Nearly 600 Templars rose up to defend the order, swearing the confessions were torn out of them by fire. And agony, for a moment, it looked as if the truth might win. And so the king made the truth impossible. He had 54 of the defending Templars declared relapsed heretics, men who had confessed and then taken it back. And on a single day in 1310, in a field outside Paris, he burned all 54 alive at once. After that, no one recanted again. The defense collapsed. The men who knew the confessions were lies had just watched 54 of their brothers burn for saying so. In 1312, at the Council of Vienne, Pope Clement V issued the bull Vox in Excelso. He did not declare the Templars guilty. He could not. The evidence was too obviously tortured out of them. Instead, he simply abolished the order altogether, not by verdict, by decree. 2 centuries of crusade, sacrifice, and blood erased with the stroke of a frightened pope's pen and the treasure, the vast Templar wealth. That started all of this. Officially, it was transferred to a rival order, the Knights Hospitaller. But before a single coin changed hands, Philip the Fair deducted his expenses. He charged the cost of the arrests, the cost of the trials, the cost of the prisons, and the torturers. He had himself repaid every debt he owed the order out of the order's own seized gold. He had, in the most literal sense, erased what he owed by erasing the men he owed it to. The conspiracy had worked perfectly. The richest order in Europe was gone. Its enemies had its gold, and the man at the top of it all, the old Grand Master Jacques de Molay, still rotted in a cell, forgotten for nearly 7 years. On the 18th of March, 1314, they brought Jacques de Molay out at last, old gray, half blind from the dark of his cell. He was led onto a scaffold before the Cathedral of Notre Dame to repeat his confession in public and be sentenced to spend his last years in chains. And then the old soldier did the one thing no one expected. In front of all of Paris, in his final hour, Jacques de Molay found his courage again.
It is just that in so terrible a day, and in the last hour of my life, I should reveal the truth. I declare before heaven and earth and confess, though to my eternal shame, that I have committed the greatest of crimes. But it was this that I lied. I lied to save my life. I confessed to sins this order never committed. The Knights Templar are innocent. The order is holy. And the confession they tore from me with fire was a lie.
The crowd erupted. The watching clergy panicked. A man who recanted was a relapsed heretic, and the penalty for that was immediate fire. Word was rushed to the king. Philip did not hesitate. He ordered de Molay burned that very evening, not in some distant field, but on a small island in the Seine, the Isle aux Juifs, in full view of the royal palace and the towers of Notre Dame. They say he asked to die. Facing the cathedral, they say he asked that his hands be left unbound so that he could fold them in prayer. And they say that as the flames climbed his body. The old Grand Master of the Knights Templar lifted his voice one final time and laid down a curse.
Pope Clement, Knight Guillaume de Nogaret, King Philip, I summon you, all three, to meet me before the throne of God within the year, there to receive your just judgment. Accursed, accursed. You shall all be accursed to the 13th generation of your lines.
And here, the chroniclers tell us, is what happened next. Pope Clement V, the man who abandoned the order, died just over 1 month later. In agony, his body, it was said, reduced almost to nothing. Guillaume de Nogaret, the architect of the whole conspiracy, was already dead, or died soon after, by some accounts, of a slow and mysterious sickness. And Philip the Fair, the cold, beautiful, untouchable King of France, in November of that same year, 1314, still in the prime of his life, he went hunting and suffered a sudden collapse, a stroke or a fall from his horse, and died. Within weeks, all three men, named from the fire, were dead inside the year, exactly as the old man had promised. Coincidence, the historians say? Of course, 3 men, all named, all dead, within the year. The dying man named Believe What You Like. But Philip's sons each took the throne, and each died young, without a surviving male heir. And within a generation, his royal line failed entirely, plunging France into a war that would last 100 years. The trial of the Knights Templar is not really a story about heresy. There was no Baphomet. There was no demon. There were only old soldiers who had given their lives to a cross, and a king who needed their gold more than he needed the truth. It is the oldest story in this courtroom that the law, in the wrong hands, is just a beautifully written excuse to take what you already wanted. If you want to come with us to the other great trials, where the powerful used the law as a weapon to the Inquisition's reckoning with Galileo, to the queen condemned by a single forged letter, to the pirate hanged twice. When the rope snapped, subscribe to the highest court, because the verdict is never the end of the story. Sometimes the dead man gets the last word